Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Chip Johnson, your host for Chicago Public Schools, the Dorm Room, Parent University, the Dorm Room, and we are having a hot topic today. We're talking about human trafficking today. This is a topic that is not widely discussed among circles, especially in the school system. I reached out to our doctor, Dr. Kenneth Fox, from the Office of Student Health and Wellness, who couldn't be here as a guest today, but is very interested in this platform. This is what we're talking about today. And the Emmaus Ministries, it's a Christian nonprofit is a Christian nonprofit working to prevent exploitation and empower male survivors of the sex trade to rebuild their lives. That's just only one component of this horrible thing. But we have guests here to talk to you about what human trafficking is. And I wanted to make sure that we brought this in because today you will find out about the topic, but you will also be able to make a difference. You'll be able to make a difference in finding solutions, how to look at signs of this, understand what the values and what the protocols around helping people involved in human trafficking could be. So we have a lot of people here. We got Dr. Kisha Roberts, Sheri from the Emmaus Ministries, Joel Mitchell, Marina Banks. We got a lot of people here. Want you to make sure that you're tuning in to CPS Parent University live on our Facebook page. You can send in your chats, things that you want to think about there. So I cannot wait to get into this conversation. I want to introduce you somebody who brought me into this awareness of human trafficking, and that is my brother, Joel Mitchell. And Joel is right there on the screen. Joel, how's everything? I know you're in another place and time right now, but I hear you're doing well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, Chip. Good evening. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for allowing us to come into this platform, the Dorm Room. We're so excited. Again, my name is Joel Mitchell. I am the Director of Outreach and Strategic Programming at Emmaus Ministries. And it is indeed just an awesome blessing and a privilege to be able to come here tonight and discuss this very important issue that is impacting all of our, young people, both, men and young women alike. So thank you so much for having us. And we are looking forward to a great discussion.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joel, what's the Emmaus Ministries? What is that all about? Tell the people what this is about here.
Emmaus Ministries, it has been around for about 30 years. And Emmaus started out as an organization that provided outreach services to men who were involved in human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And so through the years, we have been doing a great job of engaging men as they have been impacted, as they have been at risk, providing outreach services, trauma-informed services. And then as of recently, about the past 6 years, we have actually become a 30-year-old reboot. And so as we have taken a look at trends, as we have taken a look at all of the different statistics, we realized that it was important for us to kind of shift gears and begin looking and reaching out to younger people who were impacted by sex trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation. And so now we have refigured our programs and services where we are now reaching out and providing services to those 14 to 24-year-olds. We want to not only serve as victims, but now we want to even begin to provide prevention services. We want to close the front door, if you will, on this tragedy that is impacting so many of our young people.
Well, let me bring you back out. So this became a popular trend, I guess, that you all saw that needed attention, and you wanted to bring it to the awareness of the people, right?
That's so correct, Chip, because again, unfortunately, in our society, there was just not a lot of attention being given to men and boys who are impacted by sex trafficking. Now, I want to start with this caveat that any person at risk whether you are a young man or whether you're a young woman, whether you are, as you present as a young man or a young woman, anyone at risk can be exploited. Anyone at risk can be abused. And so, although our focus and our subject matter has kind of led us to work with this, we've been talking to some of my colleagues about even the invisible male, because we just have not historically been able to see young men and boys as the face of sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. So we are here to do a couple of things. One is just to rip the cover off. We want to expose it. We want people to learn. We want people to know about this all important, situation that is taking place. But not only that, we want to let people know also that there are resources, there are places where you can go, so that if you know anyone who's been impacted by this horrific crime, that there are places that you can turn to. There is help available. And we at Emmaus, we just see ourselves as a part of the larger network that are here to lock arms with people who are in this work to help those who are in need and help those who are at risk.
So let me just go back here. And when you talk about the risk, what are the risks you're talking about? Those who are at risk. Give me some context around that. And I tell you what, I'm going to bring Sheri in. Sheri is one of the she's actually the managing director of programs, because I want to. This is really interesting, Sheri. Welcome to the dorm room. And you heard Joel when he talked about the risk and students that are at risk. What does that mean?
Oh, yeah. So at risk means that you're just more prone to being trafficked. So let's talk a little bit about that. At least 56% of youth who have experienced trafficking have experienced homelessness. So if you have a young person who is in a transient situation, transient meaning you're doubled up, transient meaning that you're going from couch to couch to couch, your living situation is not safe, you're going to be more at risk. In addition to that, any young person who has experienced significant, even mild childhood sexual abuse is more likely to be at risk. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Other folks are at risk that folks don't talk about that much. And this is where the boys come in, is if you've been incarcerated. And I have so many clients who have just gotten out of jail and are looking to do the right thing. And they are taking advantage of, okay, you can stay at my place, but this is what has to happen. All right. So those are just a few examples of those who are most at risk. Those who are, one experience I had a lot was young people who are put out of their home because of how they identify. That's another example of those who are most at risk of being trafficked. Immigrants is a big population as well.
What are the ages like when you talk about this? What are the ages and how early does this start?
Sure. It varies, but on average, a couple of studies say that around the age of 14 is when it first begins.
14.
14 is about the average age. Yeah.
Wow. And it can go up to what?
It can go up to adulthood. I got a lot of adults I'm working with now. Yeah, but 14 to 24 is the population that we work with, because that is the most vulnerable population. Once, when we're talking about males, once they turn about 25 years old, that's when the market kind of goes down. They're less desirable, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And so then now those 25-year-olds are stuck just dealing with the after effects of what they've gone through for the past several years.
Okay. So I understand that there are many different forms of trafficking. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yes. Let me start out by first of all talking about what I was first exposed to as a young adult, and that is survival sex. Survival sex means that you're doing whatever it takes to just live, to just get by. Survival sex means that in exchange for food, clothing, those basic needs to be met, you're doing what you feel that you have to do to make that work. That's survival sex. The next thing that I want to talk about is just commercial sexual exploitation. And what that means is there's an exchange of money for sexual favors. Now, if someone, and you might also know this, prostitution can be an example of that, right? But if someone is under the age of 18, that's trafficking, all right? And so federal laws have changed over the years in that it is illegal to use coercion or force or fraud to get someone to have sex or do anything of the sexual nature in exchange for money. That's commercial sexual exploitation. And it's trafficking when that coercion is involved. The other one, and I don't know if you're gonna invite Marina up next, but labor trafficking is really big and it's not talked about as much, but it's prevalent. But it's that same concept, only it's about being forced or coerced into doing labor for unfair rates or no rates at all.
So, okay, so we look at that as what would be called, as far as I would know, it's slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what it is. So let me bring Marina into the conversation. Marina, welcome to the dorm room. Marina Burke, and
Thank
Marina
you.
works with the office as well as the Outreach Paralegal Human Trafficking Initiative. And so, talk to me, Marina, about labor trafficking, because we hear a lot about, you hear about the Nike shoes were being made by children, and there's so many other products that come about that they say not to buy because they're being made by children and things like that. I know labor trafficking may even be here in the United States, but we just don't talk about it much, right? What does labor trafficking look like in the United States?
Yeah, no, it's such an important point, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation here today to really have it be an inclusive conversation about trafficking. So at the Legal Aid Society of Metropolitan Family Services, where I work, I would say the majority of the cases that we see are labor trafficking, and that's not just us, but within the U.S. in general. The example you gave about Nike shoes, shoe products and things that are being made overseas, and people talking about forced labor or people who are in situations where they can't leave a job. They are being trafficked. They are being forced to work in these, as you said, slavery-like conditions. That happens here in the U.S. just as much. And it is really a shame that we don't talk about labor trafficking in quite the same ways. And, the definition that Sheri gave is exactly the same when we're talking about a situation where somebody is using force, fraud, or coercion to force someone else to work, to provide services, to provide some type of labor. That is trafficking. And whether it's happening in a legitimate industry, and I use the word legitimate to mean industries that, we know of people who work in restaurants or in agriculture or as a domestic worker, in construction, in all of these different kinds of industries, versus in the sex trade or in the commercial sex trade, that is still trafficking. And so I guess to your point about what does it look like, the same things that we talk about when we talk about sex trafficking are the same things we talk about with labor trafficking. What are the vulnerabilities? Who is at risk? What does it look like in terms of the day-to-day? And while it can vary quite a lot, exactly some of the vulnerabilities that were already mentioned are also prevalent in labor trafficking cases, particularly when you're talking about immigration status. That's something that can really be weaponized and used against somebody to make them think that they don't have a choice to leave a job or leave a bad situation. If somebody doesn't speak or read the local language, that can be really isolating. That can reduce your social network to be dependent on your trafficker. Prior experiences of abuse or violence, prior experiences of poverty, and all of these sorts of things. And I also just wanted to mention really quick that when we're talking about labor trafficking too, we also have to keep in mind that things might look a little different. So there's a lot of cases of what we call debt bondage. So this is when somebody, the person who is going to commit the trafficking, imposes a debt on their potential victim to say, if you come here to the US, I'll find you a great job. You can stay in my house. I'll provide you with everything you need to get set up here. But this is going to cost a certain amount of money. Don't worry though, you'll pay it off when you get here. And then it ends up where that person's never able to pay off that debt. And the cycle is that can't be repaid and someone feels stuck in the situation. Just wanted to mention that as well, because that's something we see quite a lot of.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because we see this on TV, right? I see a lot of shows, whether it's All Rise, I won't go naming the shows, but there are many different TV shows that really talk about this, where you open up the back of the truck and there's a load full of young girls or boys, whatever case may be. We listened to the shooting, the spa stuff where a lot of they come to these spas and work in spas and things like that. Just this is really, you don't realize it, but it's really a prevalent situation here for most people. And of course, now with the borders a little bit more loose at this time, I won't say just free for all, but a little bit more loose. You're getting a lot more of these coming into the States, right? With a lot of the immigration and people looking for jobs and kind of selling themselves and families. Do you have a lot of that going on as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I appreciate all these points being brought up because it can feel so complex. But the thing is that, regardless of whichever administration or whichever, whoever are the powers that be in the US, that these kind of global migration trends continue all the time. And we have to look at the vulnerabilities of why it is that someone might be in a situation where they need to leave or feel they have no choice but to leave their home country. And if someone on the other end, if someone in the US, say, is offering what seems like a really great job, good pay, good conditions, ability to send money back home or to, have a better life or be able to provide for your kids, that's a really big carrot to dangle in front of somebody who might be experiencing, I don't know, gang violence, poverty in their hometown, not being able to have enough work to support your family, these really difficult situations. So absolutely, seeing those trends, and it's something that I think, we're talking about specifically right now within different immigrant communities. And at the same time, people who've been born here, who were raised here, who may be US citizens, can also be trafficked for labor. So that's something I don't want to leave out either.
Right, okay. I want to bring in Dr. Roberts-Tabb, Kisha Roberts-Tabb. We're going to add you to the dorm room here because and Sheri, I'm going to bring you back because this is just a conversation that I think we all need to be a part of. Dr. Tabb, good afternoon and welcome to the dorm room. Now, I have you as the human trafficking, gender responsive LGBTQ specialist, okay? And you work specifically for the Cook County Juvenile Courts. You see a lot of this happening in the Chicago area. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So Cook County, we handle all of Cook County. So I handle all the human trafficking cases throughout the different jurisdictions of Cook County, not just Chicago. And I do want to just say that some of the things that Marina talked about as far as how pathways into labor trafficking, we see those quite often as pathways into sexual exploitation as well, specifically those areas around poverty, family support, and homelessness. I think it was Sheri that spoke about couch surfing. And in those situations, I can almost guarantee that probably 9 out of 10 girls who've come into our system has come in for something that has nothing to do with trafficking. However, it's the backstory that led to whatever crime she came into the system for, that we have to actually be able to identify those pathways. We have to have, we have to have some knowledge about what leads individuals into exploitation or to become vulnerable to traffickers and pimps, because it's those hidden things that keep it going. And so if we're not able to recognize those hidden signs, those hidden pathways, those individuals that first are introduced to these young people as some form of help. I think Sheri talked about getting out of jail. What we've seen is a lot of individuals whose parents are incarcerated that may find themselves in homeless situations, or individuals who may have had a that already was in DCFS, some form of care, and that parent or that foster parent, that grandparent died and left them in a homeless situation. And so all of these things are so interconnected that we have to be able to have situations or platforms like this where we all can come together and kind of talk about how we interact as professionals, because no one of us can do this work alone. We have to be able to collaborate on cases or on, just to be able to have conversations around how our children get here.
So Victoria, I want to bring her in too, because she works with DCFS, and so I'm sure she sees a lot of this. Now, one of the things that I'm going to ask Victoria as well to join in, and welcome to the dorm room, Victoria. We got you on camera. What is the difference here, and how do you all delineate between trafficking and prostitution and things like that. What's the differences here, Victoria? What do you see in the child system, the Department of Child and Family Services? How does this impact? How do you explain the differences here? Whether you can say somebody, because old school would say, "Oh no, you,"
thank you, sir.
Right? But the new school says, "No, it's trafficking." So there has to be a delineation between the two. Explain that for me. And Sheri, you can go ahead. You can take the lead on it if you want.
Okay, yeah, I can. Are you there? Did you want to respond, Ms. Vicky?
I'm trying to see if Vicky, you got me?
Okay.
I think she's having connection issues.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
One of the things with me and Vicky, we usually work very closely together because we serve a population that's usually involved together. They're duly involved.
We can hear you now.
I'm on. Can you hear?
We hear you. Yeah. Go ahead, Victoria. Okay, I'm gonna while Victoria's getting herself together, Dr. Tab, why don't you go ahead and finish your thought?
So when we talk about the difference between prostitution and exploitation, it's not just the idea of an age, because at the age of 18, Sheri was very eloquently defined what trafficking was, specifically around those victimization ages, which anyone under the age of 18 is considered a trafficking victim because they cannot make a choice in order to sell sex. It gets very confusing in Illinois because oftentimes they confuse the age of sexual consent, which is 17, but you can't sell sex until you're 18 years of age. Now, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on when I was talking about how individuals come into the system, because individuals cannot be arrested for anything under the age of 18. They will not be arrested for solicitation, prostitution, or anything related to those crimes. So we live in a state that does not criminalize the exploitation of minors. And so that's the biggest difference, is the idea that you cannot consent to sell sex. So there would not be a such thing as a child prostitute or a child sex worker because they have not reached the age of consent in order to sell sex.
Mm-hmm. And then that's a very specific element there that gives the differences between the two. That's good to know, especially for our audience. Sheri, what are who's impacted by this? Who's impacted or at risk of being trafficked? I know you touched upon it. And then can boys and men victims be victims of sex trafficking?
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to bring up towards what Dr. Kisha brought up was this thing about fraud. So I have this example of young people who are, they have experienced homelessness. They're trying to get out of it, and they're just trying to find out, what can I do to make a living? And so I have had a couple of clients who tried to get into, for example, the modeling industry, or who have tried to, maybe work at a restaurant in a particular way. And so they're promised these opportunities, and then it turns out to be something totally different. So you had asked that question about, what exploitation looks like, and a commercial sexual exploitation, rather, it's not, limited to like just prostitution. I wanted to just kind of bring that up, where we've had young people who are exploited in all these other ways, where they're promised one thing and it's something totally, totally different. So I just wanted to put that out there. To your other question, absolutely, 36% of youth survivors of trafficking identify as male, according to a study done as recently as, I believe, 2018 by the DOJ. It happens a lot to males. It is not just males who identify as gay. In fact, most don't identify as gay. I think about 3%, 52%, something like that. Between 52 and 57% identify as heterosexual. And this is where the problem comes in, because there are sometimes programs that support those of the GLBTQ demographic, and then there's nowhere to go when you don't identify as that. You feel like, okay, so that's not me. So then you don't know that there's a problem. But everybody, like you mentioned earlier, is exposed. I am going to do a little bit of just self-disclosure, and then I want to kind of open the floor to Dr. Kisha just to ask a question. But for myself personally, I was exposed to the trafficking world at first at the age of 6. Then again, around the age of that 14 years old, and it was by a young lady. I wasn't homeless, but it was just a young lady in school. I had been, just like I mentioned, those risk factors. I had experienced significant, childhood sexual abuse, and so that makes you obviously more vulnerable. And I remember being exposed and being told, "Oh, but you're supposed to do this, and if you don't do this, then you're not. Something's wrong with you." And they used this young lady to kind of pull me into a situation. This was under my parents' household. Okay. So one reason I'm grateful to be on this platform, and one thing I wanted to talk to Dr. Kisha about is education is just everything. So at 14, you're still, developing, figuring out who you are and all that. And for myself, I remember just wanting to like be accepted. So yeah, so I don't know. So I wanted to ask Dr. Kisha about the work she did, for example, at Kenwood in regard to just education.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, awareness, like you said, education is everything. And one thing, and I'm sure that you can attest to that. And first of all, let me just tell you that I really thank you for your transparency. Most people would not be that transparent, and thank you for the work that you're doing based on your lived experience. However, I think that the work that I've done at different schools, and it looks a lot different. People think I'll talk about going to Kenwood versus Douglas. And so individuals, when I was at Kenwood, it was almost like, I'm not sure if our students need to hear this, but in that situation, I had individuals, a male individual that came to me after, and he was actually in a trafficking situation at the time that I was there. And I was able to, connect him to some services and things of that nature. But we have to take this stigma around who is vulnerable. You talked about being in your parents' house. We have this thing where, oh no, they can be, they come from this particular background, or they go to this school, or they're very smart. So those are one of the things that I like to break up all of those myths around who can be exploited and who's vulnerable for exploitation, because some of the risk factors that we have not talked about yet are low self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Some of the risk factors that we have not talked about is obesity. When I did my dissertation, it was amazing how many, during the survey, the role that obesity played in the vulnerability of individuals that were being targeted or even recruited for trafficking, because you have someone that in most senses don't feel pretty. And then you have someone that's telling them that, oh, you look beautiful, and that's what they want to hear. We have not talked about the issue of fatherless daughters. We have not talked about the issue, so all of those things play a part. The idea of not being familiar with healthy relationships. So anything that someone says to you, it sounds great. It sounds like something that I want to be a part of. And so when I go to schools and I talk about awareness, I talk about what to look for as far as trafficking is concerned, but I also talk about what is not healthy relationships. What are these things that we should be shying away from? What are some of the things that we should be looking for in our daily interaction with individuals? So those are the things that I find most important, is specifically around sex trafficking, bringing up the idea of relationships, because you brought up a good point. Your intro into trafficking and exploitation was someone that you knew, someone that you had a relationship with, not an intimate relationship, but a friendship. Mm-hmm. And we look past those things. We look for this big mean person that's snatching individuals. We're not really talking about how the grooming takes place over time. This grooming process, the finding of, identifying vulnerabilities, how we feel a need of someone, how we introduce them to soft drugs, all of these things that we don't discuss. And that is what I think our students need to learn. And another point I want to make is that we talk a lot about going into high schools. But as you said, your intro was at a very young age. And so we do a lot of intervention, but we have failed to do any prevention when it comes to, talking about this, what people consider taboo. And so I would say that we need to start going into these primary classrooms and letting them know what to look for, not just for trafficking, but even for sexual abuse, because that is one of the major pathways into trafficking.
That is so important. And you talked about those signs. So I remember like vividly, I had to be 6. And so my grandparents saw something was different about me. And so I'm bringing that up because when you talk about what are the signs, you know, what are you looking for? I was an outgoing, you know, I talked all the time. I was this person. After I just changed, you know, and everybody was trying to point fingers. Nobody, not one time did anybody ask me what happened or are you okay? What I remember was all this talk in the background of what's going on. Did somebody do this or that? And it was all wrong, you know, and I didn't know at that time to just speak up and say, this is happening to me every time I go to this place and I don't know what to do about it, you know, that type of thing. But just look at, so some of the signs that I wanted to bring up are when there's just a drastic change in behavior. All right, that's 1. 2 is when there are these unexplainable like marks on the body, and this could happen really at any age. A young man, I've had a young man, oh, I was in a fight, you know, this happened, and the story don't even make sense when you put it all together. So when they are telling you one thing, but then a few hours later it's something totally different, just keep that in the back of your mind. That's an example. Another big example, and this I saw more of, I was a program director, I was a case manager as well at one teen residential on the south side of Chicago, and everybody would assume that the young African-American males were all just in gangs or they all were selling drugs. That's why they had 2 phones. You know, that's why they had, they would come back with, they're staying in our residential, but they're coming back with, what do you call these things? Those hotel keys, like a bunch of hotel keys, and just all these things, watches. They're going on these trips and can't tell you exactly who's going or why they're going. But these are all things to look for, you know. So those are just a couple of examples. And I don't know if you have any others that you want to share.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the idea of gang involvement. Gang membership is a huge involvement. It's a huge thing that we see when we have cases that come in for trafficking, specifically around heterosexual males and girls. And so when we think about girls and gangs, we don't really, you know, when we see a girl in a car with a bunch of guys, you know, we just assume, you know, she's kicking it, that's their homie, but we're not really paying attention to the physical dynamics, you know, how she's moving, you know, if she's fearful. And the idea of gang trafficking is huge in impoverished communities, because when you know, both you and Marina could speak to being trafficked, whether it's labor or sex. When you're trafficked by an individual, that's already scary. But when you're trafficked by a gang, you're pretty much being trafficked by everyone in your community. Even those that you may love, even those that you may be endeared to, you're still being trafficked by that particular gang that they have involvement in. And so the idea of disclosure becomes very, very scary, because not only are you putting yourself in danger by disclosing, but everyone around you.
Yeah. Before I talk to you, Marina, I know you wanted to talk about the educational aspect around this and how, if you give me 1 minute, because I see Victoria back here. I want to make sure, Victoria, you can join us here. Let me hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Victoria. Thank you. All right, Victoria. Victoria is with the Department of Children and Family Services, and I'm going to come to you, Victoria, in a minute. I'm going to keep you in the dorm room, but I want Marina to address the educational aspect around all of this that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm just like sitting here listening to all of this. Like, there are so many good points being made. This is such a amazing conversation. So thank you, Dr. Roberts. Yeah, so just in terms of the education, exactly the same things that you were just talking about. I'm sitting here nodding backstage because it's the exact experience I've had when we're talking about labor trafficking. That education is such an important component of what we're talking about when we're talking about prevention. And the type of education that we're going to be doing with, or that we are doing with labor trafficking, is know your rights prevention education. So if people know what their rights are, if they know exactly like what you're talking about, what is a healthy work relationship? What should I expect for a workplace that is fair, that is dignified, that is safe? And those are the kinds of things that, you know, we need to be showing as well. So even really, really simple things like, you have a right, no matter your immigration status, no matter what, you have the right to receive all of the pay that you earn for the work that you do. You have the right to work in a safe place. You have the right to leave any job that you want to if it's not working out for you, if you don't like it. The right to take breaks, to have a day off during the week. You have the right to be free from threats from your boss or someone else at work, making you think that you have to keep doing this or something bad is going to happen to you. And so I just wanted to tie it all together here. It's the same exact things we're talking about. It's just slightly different manifestations.
So talk about the area where the labor and the sex intersect here in trafficking.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of instances, a lot of cases, and I wonder if anyone else here can speak to this too, where someone is maybe trafficked for both labor and providing sexual services. You know, see that in various industries, like maybe in dance clubs or clubs, bars, cantinas, other places as well, where it's kind of the overlap of both. And again, it kind of goes back to that main definition where if you're talking about what trafficking is, which is forcing someone to provide services or labor using any combination of force, fraud, or coercion, it's no wonder that there are these instances where somebody's being forced to provide both.
One of the things I wanted to pinpoint, Marina introduced the idea of dance clubs. And so I think that we often forget about pornography as a form of forced labor and sex trafficking. But other things, I'm not sure if you've seen this, Marina, but I've seen cases with the whole when they're traveling salespeople forced into those industries. And I specifically see that a lot with our males. I'm not sure if you or Sheri want to speak about that, but that's something that that's come to my attention quite often. I've also seen that in traveling dance groups, not so much exotic dance groups, but in regular dance groups where individuals think that they have their children enrolled in something that is pro-social. And those individuals are, first of all, they're traveling and they're doing shows. They're not getting paid for any of the services that they're giving, and they're being exploited while being away from their parents. Wow. And of course, massage parlors.
Mm-hmm. Right. And in addition to that, the kids on the street who bang the drums.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We've had a case where a parent was forcing their kids to go out, a step parent, and forcing them to go out and not go to school in order to have a place to live. I had never even imagined that population, that trafficking would impact that group of people.
Wow.
So Victoria, you work with Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. You see a lot of these cases, young cases, middle-aged, teenage cases, things like that. Talk about your experience in working with trafficking from the DCFS perspective.
Well, our youngest youth currently is 10. Our oldest, we work with kids until they're 21.
Wow.
We have about 400 identified youth in care who are confirmed victims of sex trafficking or have enough red flags to make them highly, we suspect that they are involved in sex trafficking. So that means I have a caseload of about 400 kids across the state of Illinois who need services, who need a place to stay, and who need to be pulled out of the life.
You said 400?
Yes, over 400 youth in care.
Wow. How does this affect Chicago Public Schools?
Oh, it definitely affects Chicago Public Schools. Our kids are enrolled in schools, mostly public schools throughout the state of Illinois. So I have interactions with schools. I have interactions with teachers. I've had phone calls from principals just saying, hey, this is what we think is going on. And when the schools see that, the first thing they should do is call the hotline. The hotline is our gatekeeper. If there's an issue with the hotline, you can reach out to me, but you can always call the hotline. They take reports of youth who are suspected to be trafficked, and then we go out to an investigator out, and that's when the investigator get deeper into the circumstances.
So you say that they need to call, and of course, teachers, we get a lot of things in classrooms. What are some of the signs? I mean, how does a teacher recognize this? Whether even the principal, the counselor, things like that. What happens in a school? How can they pay more attention to the signs of trafficking to help us better get to the nuts and bolts of creating some solutions for this?
You need to know the language that they use associated with trafficking. On the stroll, if it's an older boyfriend, wearing clothes that are inappropriate or clothes that they should not be able to afford. Strange tattoos that they can't explain, seem kind of uncomfortable, out of place, missing a lot of school, a change in personality. Sheri said change in personality. That was with A student, all of a sudden they stop coming and they become a D student. Know the kids' language, and most of the kids know what their friends are doing, and so they need to be able to. The friends need to be able to understand that you're not telling on your friend. You're helping to keep your friend safe if you let a trusty adult know what's going on with that kid or what they suspect is going on.
How do you handle that in a case where the children are afraid to even mention it, to talk about it? Because again, if they let anybody know, they could be extricated from their living situation. They won't get any money or things like that. There's a lot of fear factors around this with children as well, isn't it?
For sure. Most of my kids do not admit that they've been trafficked. Dr. Kisha and I, we work together closely. If I have a dually involved youth that's in the detention center, she might do an assessment. We've started doing a similar assessment just so we can kind of see which works for us. But it's a matter of education. It's a matter of talking to kids. And some of our kids can't even identify what their experience is. They have no idea. They might be in love or be under the illusion that it's a relationship that they're with. So it's a matter of education. It's a matter of letting them know that they have adults that they can talk to.
Kisha, okay, I know Kisha it looked like she was ready to say something, Kisha, to add to this point. Because this is
just identifying factors. Sometimes we ignore the role that social media play in some of the factoring and identifying a lot of the individuals, specifically girls who come through the court system and they are high risk. A lot of that onset of that assessment comes from something going viral on social media. And so I'm always very diligent about talking to teachers, counselors, principals, and parents about when those individuals have these videos, videos that go viral, pictures that go viral. A lot of that is that is one of the cycles in the manipulation and control wheel, releasing the blackmail part of releasing pictures whenever they're not cooperating with their trafficker or their pimp. And so we have to, we have to know what those trends look like on social media. We have to know what those emojis mean on social media. We have to educate ourselves in the language of our youth, because we cannot help them if we don't understand. We can't have a conversation with them if we can't see what's going on, because we're so out of the loop about what's going on. We got to be able to have these conversations with our children, our nieces, the people in our community. I can stand on the corner and roll with the best of them, but I can only do that because of the work that I do with the youth in our department. They keep me well abreast on language and when language change, and we have to be able, not be afraid to ask questions. When individuals say, if you don't understand what they're saying, ask questions. Ask, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? They'll tell you, but we cannot sit in a role in which we think we know everything. We don't know when we were their age, it was a total different ball game. And so we have to be able to bring ourselves down, regardless of how much education, how much money we make. We got to be able to get on the level of those who we service, or we're just spinning our wheels.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also important to realize, that a pimp or a trafficker is not always present, and it does not have to be present if they're under 18 years of age for it to be labeled as trafficking.
Good point.
And on that point too, I just think I'm less familiar, of course, with when we're talking about sex trafficking of youth, but if you're talking about the words trafficker or pimp, and especially in a labor context, nobody's calling someone their trafficker. No one's saying, oh, my trafficker is making me do this. No, it's my employer or my
boyfriend.
My relative, my boyfriend.
Girlfriend.
Exactly. And that intimate connection, like you were talking about earlier, it's not an identified thing. Like, I am in a trafficking situation. It's maybe this isn't great right now, but this person is, there's that connection there. And so I just think, to your point again about language, like, we as people who work in this field, we can't be going around talking about, I don't know, just labeling everything trafficking without having that larger context of a conversation of what it actually looks like, and the fact that it's relational.
One of our viewers, Marina, while you're talking, says, can you talk about the connection between trafficking and education attainment? And then also, can you talk about the connection between trafficking and romantic relationships? I'll leave that up to the Bible.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. I will say this. I did a small survey with some of the guys that we service, And the number one, when we do like goal planning and goal setting, the number one thing that they asked for was education. If I had education, people would respect me more. If I had education, you know, I could do this other thing. Like I would have more options in life. The other thing I wanted to point out now is right now on my caseload, I won't say the number, but I have quite a few who are in college. All right, who are looking to make ends meet in college or who just graduated. And I have who have been exploited. Honestly, I got 1, 2 exploited by a professor, you know. On the other end, I've had some who were rescued out of a situation by a professor. So there is a strong link between like education at all levels and, you know, and trafficking. I also want to share this real quick towards what Dr. Kisha said earlier about us making sure that we are a team, checking in with our young people. So I have not been in school obviously in a long time, but I used to do residential work with just the younger kids. Check-ins mean everything. Just having a consistent routine check-in can make all the difference, because what we found out, stuff we had to change our whole technology policy, the place that I worked at, because we found out all this stuff was happening via TikTok. All this stuff was happening via just these different, the social media that, you know, we know Facebook and the obvious ones, but there are all these little ones where the young people are getting access and thinking that they're making friends, and they are making, when they run out of that residential, this is where they're going, you know. And so we have to figure all that out. So just making sure that if teachers, I don't know if teachers have the time to do this or what, but just a little check-in, a 3 sentence check-in could make all the difference in finding out that something is not right or something is wrong. So I wanted to throw that out there. He asked
And also
another question too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
the pimp or trafficker does not have to be an adult. So it could be a person, a student in a school. So we just have to be really mindful about our kids, their posture, their demeanor, their conversation. And like I said, how their behavior is changing in school. And just be that you are lured into trafficking by a relationship. You are pulled out with a relationship.
Absolutely, Vicky.
So it's so important that the teachers continue to do what they're doing and building relationships with their kids, knowing their students, being concerned about their students. I have not had one teacher call me to say, well, this is a bad student. They've always called to say, hey, we have a problem. This kid needs some help, and advocate very strongly that they get the help that they need. And we've even had teachers step up and become foster parents. So the school, we just need to be able to label and to identify when our kids are at risk. If you have a kid that is a youth in care, they're at risk. If you have a kid with a history of sex abuse, they're at risk. So their lifestyle, if you know they're struggling and they can't pay their rent, they keep moving from place to place to place, they're at risk.
Dr. Tab, you going to add to that?
Yeah, Vicky hit it on the head. The risk factors, even individuals who are involved in any kind of authoritative care makes them vulnerable, because you have individuals that are so transient and they're going through those detention centers, they're going through those foster care systems, they're going through those group homes. And in the meantime, they are still recruiting, because everyone who find themselves, you know, everyone we encounter is not ready to get out of their life. And so we have to be very mindful and understanding that language, like Vicky talked about, being able to understand, like when they're talking about turnout. So when they're talking about their squad, being able to differentiate that language. But I did want to answer the question about education, attainment, and trafficking. I think it is very important that we talk about not just academic education, but we also have to be mindful that some of the individuals who find themselves coming out of a trafficking situation or a situation of exploitation have not been in school in years. And so putting them in a traditional school setting probably won't be the best situation for them, but offering them some transferable skills, putting them into some trade programs, things that they can build on that they've learned in the life, specifically that around the beauty industry, styling, and things that they have already acquired strengths in, building on the strengths that they've already acquired, and then getting them certified so that they can make an honest living off of things that they've already, they already know how to do. Okay.
Yeah, and Marina, I know you wanted to add something to that educational aspect as well, right?
Yeah, yes, in terms of just thinking about the connection between the risk factor, of course, and this has already been said much more eloquently than I could by everyone else here on the call, but when you're talking about education as a factor. So again, thinking about lack of formal education or inability to read, even if we have cases where, someone may be illiterate, and that creates such a vulnerability as well in terms of just increasing that risk again. But then, like everyone has already said, on the flip side of that, education being a tool to develop upon, to gain access to be able to then, have the tools to take matters into your own hands after going through a situation like this. And so one of the remedies, I guess, or one of the things that is available if someone has gone through a situation of trafficking is that they are entitled to employment assistance, along with a whole host of other things that I don't know if we're going to talk about later, otherwise I can hold off on. But, just thinking about what are the things that someone might need after coming out of a situation like this, whether it's labor trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation.
Mm-hmm. I got you. So we've talked a lot about situations and things about what it is and all that kind of stuff. I think we need to add now where people can get help. Where can they find help? How do they go for help? People, teachers, I'm thinking teachers, counselors, principals, APs, assistant principals. How, when they see these signs, where can they go to get the help that they need? And how can they do it where it's not a violation of their privacy or they feel condemned by those who notice it? Sheri, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure. So as we mentioned earlier, I'm going to share with you a couple of hotline numbers. If you are somebody who suspects that something is happening to one of your students or friends, mom, as Vicky has already stressed, 1-800-25-ABUSE when it's a child, right? And then there's also a hotline number I'd like to share, 888-373-7866. I don't know if we can put that in the chat, but that's just the national hotline number that you can call 24/7 to get assistance when you think something is happening and you're not really sure.
Give me that number again.
Sure, 888-373
Okay.
7866. And you call this if it's yourself or if it's someone else when you just don't know what to do. And then of course you can always call our number. That's 773-334-6063, and we will always get you to where you need to go or be the ones to support you. If that's
773-334-6063.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dr. Tab, let's talk about help. Where do you send people when they need help outside of the Emmaus Foundation?
So I send people to every person that is on this call, depending on what's going on. I would like individuals to be aware that the CAC Center, the Children's Advocate Center, is available not only for forensic interviews. If you work within the school system, if you are a teacher and you suspect that something is going on, but you're really not sure, they have trained forensic interviewers that can interview a youth, a minor. They will have a DCFS officer and a police officer in the back. They may not know that they're there when they're being interviewed, but that is a good way to get the information that you need without specifically asking, are you being trafficked? It's just, they are very good around talking around those issues. She mentioned the hotline, and you can also, one thing about the hotline, if you find yourself in a situation where you are unsafe, you can also text on that hotline. You can text info or help to be free on the hotline, and they'll interact with you on that same national hotline without actually having to make a phone call. I also have a care line that is a 24-hour care line. That number is 577-HELP-HER. That information, and I use words like help her. I use words because it's easier to remember than numbers. And so and also with our hotline, there is an answer. You can leave a message, you can text, you can interact with text, or you can have a conversation. And I always tell people, if you find yourself in some type of immediate danger and you cannot call the police, you can text that information, text whatever information you need to our hotline, and we will contact authorities for you.
Okay. Victoria, what resources do you have for help?
Well, we contract with Selah Freedom. which is an organization that provides prevention services. We contract with them to go throughout the state of Illinois to provide education, awareness, and training. We work with a program called Halo. We work with Reclaim 13, and we call Dr. Kisha, and we call Emmaus, and we call Metropolitan, and we call the Advocacy Center. So we are a good network, and we work together really well to ensure that the needs of that individual are met.
Okay. For the last parting comments here, we got about 4 minutes before we end. What do we want our students to know? Not only just in Chicago Public Schools, but just students all over the state of Illinois, all over the nation around this whole thing. What do we want our students to know? I'm going to start with Marina. What would you like our students to know? And our parents. Let me include parents too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I would love for students to know that, especially, because when it comes to labor trafficking, they can be advocates, they can be allies too. Students can help, if we're talking about parents of students who might be in a labor trafficking or a labor exploitation situation, or an aunt or an uncle, someone in their family, students can be allies and advocates. If students know that everyone has the right to work and be paid for the work they're doing, that nobody should be threatened with deportation or arrest or calling immigration as a way to make someone stay in a job that feels unsafe. And if students know that there are immigration legal remedies for people who've been through this situation, regardless of their immigration status, if they're undocumented, if they have a temporary visa, they have a green card, whatever, I want to bring students into that conversation and have them join us as advocates and allies to share that information and, just be able to empower themselves, empower their families. So that's what I would say. And, just thank you again for this platform and being able to chat with everyone today.
Dr. Tad?
I would like students to be aware of things that they may see on social media, sites to stay away from. If you see someone that's sending you a link to sites like Skip the Game, Mega Personals, list crawlers, all of those things, stay away from those things. Be very mindful around the emojis that you use on social media, because sometimes I don't think a lot of our youth are using these emojis to advertise, but for those who are looking to exploit you, those are red flags for them to start coming into your inbox. And so staying away from body part emojis like peaches, donuts, tongues, and all of those things that may may elicit some type of abuser or trafficker. And also staying away from links to undisclosed parties, jobs, model calls. I think Sheri talked about model calls and all of these jobs that they're advertising on Facebook. I don't know about you. I've worked a lot. I never really secured a job from any kind of social media site, and so just staying away from those things that don't make sense.
Right.
And specifically gaming. I think we have not talked about that.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Those individuals who have young people who are operating these gaming systems. There are cases that's coming in as young as 7, where individuals are, eliciting younger people to send pictures that they're using for, porn and things of that nature from gaming systems. And so for parents, please monitor your child's interaction, whether it's on social media, just on the internet, and on their gaming systems.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Sheri, what about you? Parting comments?
Yes. But real quick, I want to change that number I gave you.
Oh, I think it's right. I got it from the website. 888-373-7888.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, awesome. What I want to tell the students is that, number one, you matter. You have value. Your story deserves to be heard. I want to especially talk to my boys, my fellas. Tell your story. Find a safe space. I want to tell parents to create space. Teachers, create safe spaces for young people to talk to you. Listen in between the lines. I want to let young folks know that if you need any help, you can reach out to any of those numbers that we gave you. You can also email us at streets.org. So just reach out and get help if you need help.
Streets.org. That's the website.
That's the website. Yep. You can also reach me at my email. My email is Sheri, SHERI, at streets.org.
Yeah, I'm putting putting that in the comment on Facebook. And then Marina, you wanted to share the Legal Aid Society's number?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah. So you can always call, even if you're not sure if you need legal assistance, even if you're not sure that you're in a trafficking situation or just what doesn't seem like an okay work situation, or you have questions about your rights, you can always call us. Our phone number is 312-986-4105. We have staff that speak Spanish and English, and we can also use an interpreter line if we don't have staff who speak your language. You can leave a voicemail, we'll call you back. And yeah, just feel free to reach out anytime, even if you're not sure if you need legal assistance. It's free, it's confidential, we can't share your information with anybody, and all of our services are completely free.
Okay.
One other thing, Chip, if I could just tell individuals, especially since we're talking about statewide youth, if you find yourselves in a situation where you've been taken out of your environment, if you've been taken to another city or state, you can always go to Amtrak and Greyhound. They will provide services to individuals who find themselves in trafficking situations. I've used both services. And so if you are a parent or you know someone who wants to come home and may not have those funds to get home, those individual transportation services will help trafficking victims.
Okay. Victoria, we missed you for a minute. Last words for our parents and students.
Any issues or concerns, you can always call the hotline, the DCFS hotline, 1-800-25-ABUSE. Youth, you are valuable. Parents, pay attention. Youth, don't believe everything you see and read on social media.
Well, this has been, I'm telling you, it's been an enlightening conversation. You know, this is on CPS Parent University Facebook page, but of course we archive it. It's going to be on our Facebook page. So make sure that you send anybody that needs help, they can listen to our Facebook page. I'm also going to send you a recorded copy for you to share with your audience members, because this is something that we need to really talk more about. And I think I'm going to try to invite Dr. Kenneth Fox, our CPS doctor, medical doctor. He's been doing a whole lot around the virus right now, but I think he needs to be a part of this conversation, him and his team, to really figure out how we can best support our students when it comes to human trafficking. I want to thank you, Marina, Dr. Tab, Victoria, Sheri, for being a part of the dorm room. And then Joel is in the backstage. He's over there. Joel, I'm gonna bring you on camera for a minute, and just so we can see you. Want to thank you for if you can unmute. Is it too loud where you are? Okay, Joel.
It is really loud.
Oh, we can't hear him. You good. I heard you.
You good.
Okay, thank you. Well, Chip, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us to have this opportunity. I also, on behalf of Sheri, myself, our executive director, Noah Adair, our director of development, John Blasey. We're a small team, but we're a mighty force. But we cannot do anything without all of these wonderful people like our panel that's on tonight. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Kisha, to Marina, and to Vicky. You all have been just so gracious in welcoming us into the community, because we've been around for 30 years, but we're really like a new startup. And so we really appreciate all of the hospitality. We thank you for the relationship, and we definitely look forward to continuing this partnership. And Chip, again, I just want to say thank you, my brother. It's been a blessing, and I look forward to continuing to working with you as well.
Yeah, we're going to have to continue this relationship, but I want to thank you all for being in our dorm room today. This has been fantastic. Our dorm room, you know, we do Tuesdays at 4:30, the first, second, and third Tuesdays of every month. And I want you all to make sure that you all tune in. The next one coming up in June, when we kick off our summer series, we're going to talk about community policing. And we got a surprise show. Hopefully we can get this together before the end of June. But we're going to save that as a surprise. But this is a great opportunity. You all need to make sure you all are looking at the signs on human trafficking. Get to know what this looks like. This social media can take your kids and just really get them real quick before you know it. So on behalf of Chicago Public Schools, our Family and Community Engagement and Education Department, you see that right on this, right over my shoulder here, phase 2, we call it. We do a lot to just inform our parents and communities about what's going on. And this has been a great opportunity to share what's going on in our society around human trafficking. Had some great guests. make sure you tune in next week or the week after next. I'll let you know week after next for another session on the dorm room, Chicago Public Schools Parent University dorm room. I'm just excited about this. Thank you all for joining. This concludes it, and hope you all got something out of it. If you have any information, always contact us at Family and Community Engagement and Education. You can find out our number on cps.edu/face. Okay, great job. Have a great week, everybody. This is Chip Johnson.